The room erupted in stunned silence as the sharp crack of a voice sliced through the elegant hum of the gala. "You do not belong here?" Every head turned. At the center of the grand ballroom, beneath chandeliers dripping with crystal and gold, stood a young black woman frozen in place. Her hands trembled as she clutched the thin strap of her worn handbag, knuckles white, eyes wide with shock and shame. She looked painfully small against the vast luxury surrounding her. Across from her, an event staff supervisor, tall, impeccably dressed, his badge gleaming, jabbed a finger inches from her face. "Don't act confused," he snapped loudly. "We all know why you're here. You people always try this, sneaking into places you weren't invited." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Phones rose into the air, screens glowing, cameras rolling. Whispers broke out like wildfire. "Did he really just say that? This is so uncomfortable. Someone should stop him." But no one did. The woman swallowed hard, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Her eyes darted around the room, faces blurred together. Wealthy donors in tailored suits, women draped in designer gowns, security guards pretending not to see. Not a single person stepped forward. I was invited," she finally managed, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. The supervisor laughed, short, cruel, and loud enough to echo off the marble floors. "Invited?" he scoffed. "By who? The catering staff? The cleaning crew?" A few people laughed nervously, most looked away. The woman's cheeks burned, tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked furiously, refusing to let them fall. "I have the invitation," she said, reaching slowly into her bag, her movements cautious, afraid any sudden motion might make things worse. Before she could pull anything out, the supervisor slapped her hand away. "Don't touch anything," he barked. "I'm not stupid. Fake invites, fake stories, same old tricks." His voice rose, sharp and cutting. "Do you have any idea how much this event costs to host? How exclusive it is? People like you think you can just walk in because you see a few fancy lights?" Her shoulders collapsed inward as if she were trying to make herself disappear. Please," she whispered. "I'm not causing trouble." "Trouble," he sneered. "You already are trouble. You're making everyone uncomfortable." He turned to the surrounding guests, spreading his arms dramatically. "Ladies and gentlemen, we take security very seriously here. We can't allow anyone to disrupt this evening." His eyes flicked back to her, cold and judgmental. "And frankly," he said, lowering his voice just enough to sting, "you don't look like someone who belongs among billionaires." The word billionaires hung heavy in the air. The woman flinched as if struck, her breath hitched. Tears spilled over now, tracing silent paths down her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly with the back of her hand, embarrassed, humiliated, exposed. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I didn't mean—" "Sorry doesn't cut it," he interrupted. "Security." Two guards shifted uneasily near the edge of the room but didn't move in yet. The crowd watched, some with pity, others with curiosity, many with discomfort. But still no one spoke, and that silence, it screamed louder than his insults. "Let me ask you something right now, question of the day. Have you ever been judged, humiliated, or treated as less than just because of how you look or where you come from? What would you have done if you were standing in that room? Tell us in the comments. And while you're there, let us know where you're watching from today. Your voice matters here." Back in the ballroom, the supervisor folded his arms, clearly enjoying the power he held. "You have 10 seconds, he said, glancing theatrically at his watch. 10 seconds to leave before I have you escorted out." The woman's chest rose and fell rapidly. Her legs felt weak. She looked down at the polished floor, her reflection warped in its shine. 10 seconds, 9, 8. Her mind screamed with 1,000 thoughts. "I shouldn't have come. I knew this would happen. Why did I think I could belong here?" 7, 6. A sob slipped free despite her best efforts. 5. Then a calm, steady voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." The words were soft, controlled, unmistakably powerful. The supervisor stiffened, irritation flashing across his face as he turned toward the speaker. From the edge of the crowd stepped a man no one had noticed before. He was dressed simply, no flashy logos, no exaggerated wealth, but everything about him radiated quiet authority. His posture was relaxed, his gaze steady, his presence commanding without effort. He looked at the trembling woman first, not with judgment, not with curiosity, but with unmistakable concern. Then he turned his eyes to the supervisor. "You will lower your voice," the man said evenly, "and you will step away from her right now." A murmur swept through the room. The supervisor scoffed. "And who exactly are you supposed to be?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he placed himself subtly, deliberately between the woman and her accuser. And in that moment, something shifted. The air felt heavier, charged, as if the room itself was holding its breath. The supervisor had no idea. No idea that the person he had just dismissed, No idea that the woman he was humiliating were connected by a truth so powerful it was about to turn his world upside down. But before we get to that, before everything changes, we need to go back. Back to the very beginning. Back to the morning that started it all. Let's go back to how this story truly began this morning. The day had begun long before the sun rose. In a cramped, one-bedroom apartment tucked into the oldest corner of the city, Aaliyah Monroe woke to the sound of coughing. It wasn't an alarm clock. It was her mother. Aaliyah opened her eyes instantly, her body already moving before her mind fully caught up. She swung her legs off the thin mattress she shared with her younger sister and crossed the cold floor barefoot. "Mom," she whispered gently, pushing open the bedroom door. Her mother, Ruth Monroe, lay propped against a stack of worn pillows, one hand pressed to her chest, the other gripping a faded handkerchief. Her breathing was shallow, each cough scraping painfully from deep inside her lungs. "I'm okay," Ruth said quickly, though her voice betrayed her. "Go back to sleep, baby." Aaliyah knelt beside the bed, her brow creasing with worry. "You're not okay," she said softly. "You haven't been okay for weeks." She reached for the glass of water on the nightstand and helped her mother take a sip. The water shook slightly in Ruth's hands. At just 24 years old, Aaliyah carried a weight far heavier than her years. She had learned early that rest was a luxury and fear, a constant companion. The apartment smelled faintly of instant coffee and old paint. The heater hadn't worked properly since last winter, and the walls bore cracks like scars from decades of neglect. But Aaliyah kept the place as clean as she could, every surface wiped, every dish washed. Order was the one thing she could control. From the other room, her 8-year-old sister, Maya, stirred. "Aaliyah," Maya mumbled sleepily. "Is Mom sick again?" Aaliyah forced a smile she didn't feel. "She's just tired," she said. "Go back to sleep, okay? I'll make breakfast soon." Maya nodded, trusting her completely, and curled back under the thin blanket. Aaliyah turned back to her mother. "Did you take your medication last night?" she asked. Ruth looked away. Aaliyah didn't need an answer, she already knew. The prescription bottle on the nightstand was nearly empty, far too empty for how early it was in the month. "I told you," Ruth said quietly, shame creeping into her tone. "You don't need to worry about me, you already do too much." Aaliyah swallowed the lump in her throat. "I'm your daughter," she said. "Worrying is part of the job." She stood and walked to the small kitchen, opening the fridge. Inside were half a carton of milk, a few eggs, and a loaf of bread nearing its expiration date. She exhaled slowly. "We'll make it work," she told herself, as she always did. As she cooked, Aaliyah's mind drifted back through years of struggle. She had once dreamed of becoming a nurse. She loved helping people, loved the idea of healing. But when her father died suddenly when she was 17, dreams were the first things to go. Medical bills, rent, groceries, responsibility. College turned into double shifts at a diner. Scholarships turned into survival. Still, Aaliyah never complained. At the diner, she was known as the girl who stayed late, who covered shifts, who smiled even when customers were rude. She tucked her pain away neatly, the way she folded laundry, out of sight, out of mind. She brought 2 plates to the small table, toast and scrambled eggs. Maya bounced into her chair, chattering about school. Ruth ate slowly, clearly exhausted, but she smiled at her daughters like they were her greatest achievement. After breakfast, Aaliyah helped Maya get dressed, braiding her hair carefully. "You're the best sister ever," Maya said, grinning. Aaliyah laughed softly. "Don't tell Mom, she'll get jealous." Ruth chuckled weakly from the couch. But as the morning wore on, Ruth's condition worsened. By mid-morning, her coughing had turned harsher, her skin pale and clammy. She tried to hide it, but Aaliyah saw everything. "Mom," Aaliyah said, kneeling again, "we need to get you help." Ruth shook her head. "We can't afford the hospital, Aaliyah." Aaliyah's chest tightened. "I'll figure something out." Ruth grabbed her hand. "No," she said firmly, "you don't owe me your life." Aaliyah squeezed her mother's hand, tears burning behind her eyes. "You gave me mine," she whispered. "Let me try." She went to her room and opened the small metal box she kept hidden beneath her bed. Inside, a few crumpled bills, loose coins, and a folded piece of paper. An invitation, elegant, cream-colored, gold lettering. She stared at it like it might disappear. The name at the bottom read, "Hosted by Jonathan Hale." She didn't know much about him, only that he was powerful, impossibly wealthy, and that he had personally invited her after a chance encounter weeks ago. She had almost thrown the invitation away. "I don't belong there," she had thought. But now. Aaliyah looked back toward the living room where her mother struggled to breathe. Her heart pounded. This invitation wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a chance, a long shot, a terrifying risk, but maybe, just maybe, it was the only door left unopened. Aaliyah closed the box, stood up straight, and whispered to herself, "I have to try." She had no idea what awaited her, only that by the end of the day, her life would never be the same. By late morning, fear had settled into Aaliyah Monroe's chest like a heavy stone. Her mother's condition was getting worse, far worse than Ruth was willing to admit. Ruth sat on the couch now, a blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders despite the warmth creeping into the apartment. Her breaths came in short, shallow gasps, each one followed by a quiet wheeze that made Aaliyah's stomach twist. "Aaliyah," Ruth said weakly, forcing a smile. "Sit down, baby. You've been pacing holes in the floor." Aaliyah stopped, though her hands continued to shake. "I'm calling the clinic," she said. "They said if your symptoms get worse, you have to come in." Ruth's eyes filled with fear, not of illness, but of cost. "No hospitals," she said quickly. "You know what happened last time? The bills nearly buried us." Aaliyah looked away, her jaw tightening. She remembered it clearly. The months of debt, the collection calls, the eviction notice taped to their door like a public shaming. She remembered choosing between electricity and medication, between food and dignity. And now here they were again. Aaliyah knelt in front of her mother, taking her hands. "Mom," she said softly, "you're not okay. I can hear it in your breathing. Please." Ruth shook her head slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm scared," she whispered. "But I'm more scared of what will happen to you girls if we can't pay." Aaliyah's throat closed. "I won't let anything happen to us," she said, though she wasn't sure how she could keep that promise. She stood and went to the kitchen, pulling open the drawer where she kept bills. Past due notices spilled out: rent, utilities, medical expenses. Each one felt like a countdown. Her phone buzzed, a text from the landlord, final notice. Rent due today or vacate by Friday. Aaliyah pressed her eyes shut. Today. She checked her bank app, already knowing the truth. $37.42. That wouldn't even cover her mother's inhaler refill, let alone rent. Her hands trembled as she set the phone down. She leaned against the counter, sliding slowly to the floor. And then she broke. Silent tears streamed down her face as she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to keep from making a sound. She didn't want Maya to see. She didn't want her mother to hear. She had tried everything: extra shifts, borrowing from coworkers who were barely surviving themselves, selling her old laptop, even skipping meals so Maya could eat. There was nowhere else to turn, nowhere except one place. Her eyes drifted again to the bedroom, to the invitation. She pulled it out, unfolding it carefully as if it were made of glass. Exclusive charity gala by invitation only. Her name was handwritten beneath it. Aaliyah Monroe. She remembered the man who had given it to her. Jonathan Hale. She had met him weeks ago outside the diner during a rainstorm. His car had broken down. She had shared her umbrella, brought him coffee, talked to him like he was just another person. He had listened, really listened. When she spoke about her mother's illness, about working 2 jobs, about giving up her dreams, he hadn't interrupted. Before leaving, he had pressed the invitation into her hand. "Come," he had said. "If you need anything, come." At the time, she had smiled politely, convinced it was nothing more than a kind gesture from a stranger who lived in a different world. But now. Her mother coughed again, harder this time. Aaliyah rushed to her side, panic flooding her veins. "Mom," she cried. Ruth gasped, clutching her chest. "I can't catch my breath." Aaliyah grabbed her phone, fingers shaking as she hovered over the emergency call button. But Ruth shook her head desperately. "Please," she whispered. "Don't." Aaliyah felt helpless, trapped, terrified. Her mother needed medicine. They needed money. They needed help now. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Every second felt like it was stealing something from her. She stood slowly, decision crystallizing in her chest. "I'm going out," Aaliyah said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I'll be back soon, I promise." Ruth looked at her, fear and understanding colliding in her eyes. "Where are you going?" she asked. Aaliyah hesitated, then answered honestly. "To ask for help." She hugged Maya tightly, pressing a kiss to her sister's forehead. "Be good," she whispered. "Watch Mom for me." Maya nodded, sensing the seriousness. Aaliyah went to her room and stared at her reflection. She had one decent dress, simple, navy blue, slightly faded. She smoothed it down carefully, tying her hair back neatly. She didn't look like she belonged in a room full of billionaires, but she didn't care. She cared about her mother breathing through the night. She cared about keeping her family together. As she grabbed her coat, doubt surged. What if they laugh at me? What if they throw me out? What if this is a mistake? But then she thought of Ruth gasping for air, and that was enough. Aaliyah stepped out the door, locking it behind her with trembling hands. She had no safety net, no backup plan, only courage born from desperation. And as she walked toward a future that terrified her, she had no idea she was walking straight into a moment that would expose cruelty and awaken justice. Her choice had been made. There was no turning back now. The bus ride felt longer than usual. Aaliyah sat near the back, clutching her handbag in her lap like it was the only thing anchoring her to reality. The city blurred past the window, rows of boarded-up shops giving way to cleaner streets, then to gleaming storefronts she had only ever seen from a distance. Each stop pulled her farther from home and deeper into doubt. She glanced down at her shoes, clean but worn. The sole of one was starting to separate slightly at the toe. She pressed it back with her foot, embarrassed even though no one was looking. "What am I doing?" she thought. Her reflection stared back at her in the window, young, tired, determined. She looked like someone who had learned to survive, not someone who belonged among crystal chandeliers and champagne glasses. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Hope, small, fragile, but alive. She reached into her bag and touched the folded invitation again, feeling the raised gold lettering beneath her fingers. Jonathan Hale. The name echoed in her mind. She didn't know if he would even remember her. People like him met hundreds of faces every day. She was just a girl from a diner who shared an umbrella in the rain. Still, he had written her name himself. The bus jerked to a stop. "Downtown Arts District," the driver called. Aaliyah stood, heart racing. This was it. She stepped off the bus and was immediately swallowed by a world that felt unreal. The street was lined with luxury vehicles, sleek black sedans, glossy sports cars. Valets moved with precision, opening doors for guests dressed in tailored suits and gowns that shimmered under the afternoon sun. Ahead of her rose the Grand Larkspur Hotel. Towering glass walls reflected the sky. Gold-trimmed doors stood wide open, guarded by security in crisp uniforms. A red carpet stretched across the entrance like a boundary line between two worlds. Aaliyah slowed her pace. Her chest tightened with every step. She watched a couple pass her, laughing softly, their voices light, their confidence effortless. They didn't glance at her. No one did. She adjusted her coat, suddenly hyper-aware of everything about herself, her skin, her clothes, her place. She stopped a few feet from the entrance. The noise faded into a dull hum as her thoughts grew louder. "They'll see right through me. They'll know I don't belong. What if they call security before I even speak?" She remembered the look on her mother's face that morning, the fear, the weakness. And then she remembered something else, Jonathan's voice. "If you need anything, come." Aaliyah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Fear walked beside hope, but hope took one more step. She straightened her shoulders and approached the doors. Inside, the hotel lobby was breathtaking. Marble floors gleamed beneath towering pillars. A massive floral arrangement dominated the center, surrounded by guests checking in for the gala. Soft, classical music floated through the air. Aaliyah felt every eye on her, even when no one was actually looking. She walked carefully, afraid of doing something wrong, afraid of drawing attention. At the registration table, a young woman in a sleek black dress looked up. "Invitation, please." Aaliyah handed it over, her fingers trembling. The woman scanned it quickly, then frowned. "One moment." Her stomach dropped. The woman whispered to a colleague, who glanced at Aaliyah, then at the invitation, then back at Aaliyah. Aaliyah's heart hammered. "Is something wrong?" she asked quietly. "No," the woman said stiffly. "Just wait here." Guests flowed around her, casting curious glances. Aaliyah stood still, feeling like an exhibit. After a minute that felt like an hour, the colleague nodded. "You may proceed," she said, handing the invitation back without apology. Aaliyah exhaled shakily. She followed the signs toward the ballroom, each step echoing too loudly in her ears. As she approached, voices grew louder, laughter, conversation, the clink of glasses. She paused just outside the doors, her hand hovered over the handle. This was the point of no return. For Mom, she told herself. She pushed the door open. The ballroom was even more magnificent than she imagined. Chandeliers sparkled overhead. Round tables draped in white linen filled the space. Guests mingled freely, their laughter confident, their movements assured. Aaliyah stepped inside. Almost immediately she felt it. The shift. Heads turned, not all at once, but enough. Eyes lingered, whispers followed. She walked slowly, searching the room for a familiar face, Jonathan. But before she could take more than a few steps, a sharp voice rang out. "Excuse me." She turned. A man in a tailored suit stood before her, his expression tight, his gaze assessing. "Can I help you?" He asked, though his tone suggested otherwise. Aaliyah swallowed. "Yes," she said. "I'm looking for—" He cut her off with a glance up and down. "This area is restricted to invited guests only." "I am invited," she replied, holding out the invitation. He didn't even take it. Instead, he frowned. "Wait here." He turned and motioned to someone else, a man with a supervisor badge. And as that man approached, his eyes narrowing the moment he saw her, Aaliyah felt a chill crawl up her spine. Fear squeezed her heart. Hope trembled. She had crossed the threshold, and now judgment was waiting. She had no idea this moment, this pause, was the calm before a storm that would expose cruelty and summon justice from the most unexpected place. She stood her ground, and the confrontation began. The supervisor stopped directly in front of Aaliyah. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a sharp jawline and a badge that read Event Operations Manager Daniel Whitmore. His eyes swept over her slowly, critically, as though he were inspecting a defect. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, though his tone suggested he had already decided. The junior staff member spoke quickly. "She says she's invited." Whitmore let out a short, humorless laugh. "Says," he repeated, his eyes never leaving Aaliyah's face. Aaliyah held out the invitation again, her hand shaking now. "I am invited," she said quietly. "My name is on it." Whitmore finally took the card, but only between two fingers, like it might stain him. He glanced at it briefly, then looked back at her with open disbelief. "You expect me to believe this?" he asked. "Yes," Aaliyah replied, her voice trembling but sincere. "Because it's true." Whitmore's lips curled. "Do you have any idea how exclusive this event is?" he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "This is a private charity gala, billionaires, CEOs, people who actually matter." A few heads turned. Aaliyah felt heat rush to her face. "I was personally invited," she said, "by Jonathan Hale." The name landed like a stone dropped into water. For a split second, Whitmore hesitated, then he laughed longer this time. "Oh, that's a good one," he said, shaking his head. "Jonathan Hale," he turned to the surrounding guests. "Did you hear that?" he announced. "She claims Jonathan Hale invited her." Murmurs spread instantly, some skeptical, some amused, some uncomfortable. Aaliyah's chest tightened. "I'm not lying," she said. "I met him weeks ago. He gave me the invitation himself." Whitmore stepped closer, invading her space. "Listen," he said quietly, venom dripping beneath the calm. "I've worked events like this for over a decade. I know exactly who gets invited." His eyes swept over her again, slow, deliberate. "And you," he said coldly, "are not it." Aaliyah's hands clenched at her sides. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said. "I just need to speak with him." Whitmore scoffed. "You don't need anything here," he snapped. "What you need is to leave before you embarrass yourself further." A woman nearby whispered to her companion, "This is awkward." Another raised her phone discreetly. Aaliyah could feel the room closing in. "I followed the rules," Aaliyah said, her voice cracking. "I checked in, they let me in." Whitmore's face hardened. "Then someone made a mistake," he said sharply, "and I'm correcting it." He raised his voice. "Security," the word echoed. Aaliyah flinched. "Please," she said, tears pooling now despite her efforts. "I just need a moment, please." Whitmore crossed his arms. "This isn't a shelter," he said. "You can't just wander in because you're desperate." The word desperate sliced deep. She swallowed a sob. "I'm not asking for charity," she said. "I was invited." Whitmore shook his head. "People like you always say that," he replied dismissively. "Always a story, always a reason." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice, but not enough. "You think because this is a charity event you can just blend in, use sympathy to get close to powerful people?" Aaliyah's vision blurred. "I'm not trying to blend in," she whispered. "I'm just trying to survive." That only seemed to irritate him more. "Oh, don't start crying now," he snapped. "This is exactly the kind of scene we don't need." The crowd had grown thicker. Guests stood in small clusters, watching. No one stepped in. No one challenged him. Their silence screamed approval, or at least indifference. Whitmore gestured sharply toward the exit. "You're leaving," he said. Now, Aaliyah's legs felt weak. "I can't," she said softly. "Please," he scoffed. He repeated. "You walked in, you can walk out." She looked around, searching for kindness, for understanding, for anyone. She found none. Whitmore's voice rose again. "I don't know what you thought you were doing," he said, "but this isn't your world, and the sooner you accept that, the better." Something inside Aaliyah cracked. "I know this isn't my world," she said, tears spilling freely now. "I never said it was, but that doesn't mean I don't belong anywhere." Whitmore stared at her, unimpressed. "Belong," he said coldly. "You belong outside before you ruin the night for everyone else." The words landed like a final blow. Aaliyah's shoulders slumped. Around them, the room buzzed with hushed commentary. "Is she really lying? This is uncomfortable. Why doesn't someone help her?" But no one did. Not one voice rose in her defense. Not one hand reached out. The humiliation pressed down on her chest until it was hard to breathe. She looked down at the invitation still clutched in her hand. It felt heavier now, like a cruel joke. Whitmore stepped aside, clearing a path to the exit. "Go," he said, "before I make this worse for you." Aaliyah stood there, shaking. She had walked in with hope. Now she stood drowning in judgment. And as she took a small step backward, toward the door, toward defeat, she didn't notice the man in the crowd watching quietly. The one whose eyes had narrowed, not in judgment, but in recognition and anger. The moment was about to reach its breaking point. But first, Aaliyah would have to fall even further. Aaliyah stood motionless, her body trembling as if the floor beneath her might give way. Every instinct told her to run. To turn around, to flee the stares, the whispers, the burning humiliation crawling under her skin. Her chest felt tight, each breath shallow and unsteady, as though the air itself had grown heavier in the ballroom. Whitmore watched her with thinly veiled impatience. "Well," he snapped, "I don't have all night." The words echoed louder than they should have. Aaliyah's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her throat felt locked, paralyzed by shame. She glanced around the room one last time, faces blurred together. People she didn't know, people who would forget her by morning. Some looked uncomfortable, some looked curious, some looked annoyed as if she were the problem. No one looked angry on her behalf, no one stepped forward. That silence, it hurt more than every word Whitmore had thrown at her. She wiped at her face clumsily, smearing tears across her cheeks. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped the invitation. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Words came automatically, conditioned by years of apologizing for taking up space. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." Whitmore sighed theatrically, as if she were exhausting him. "There it is," he said. "Apology accepted, now leave." Aaliyah nodded, her shoulders folding inward. She took a step toward the exit, then another. Each step felt like walking away from more than just a room. She was walking away from hope, from the last chance she had to save her mother from another night of suffering. Her thoughts raced. What am I going to tell Mom? What am I going to do when the rent is due? How do I fix this? The answer echoed painfully in her mind. You can't. Her vision blurred again, and this time she didn't fight it. Tears spilled freely, silent and relentless. A woman near the doorway shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. A man checked his watch. The guards stood still, faces blank. Aaliyah felt invisible, worthless, small. She reached the edge of the carpet. Just one more step and she would be out. One more step and this humiliation would be over. Whitmore's voice followed her. "Next time," he said loudly, "know your place before you embarrass yourself." The words hit her like a physical blow. Her knees buckled slightly. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. A soft sob escaped her before she could stop it. Her entire body shook now. She wanted to scream, to ask why no one cared, to ask why kindness was so rare, but she didn't. Because years of being overlooked had taught her that silence was safer. She lowered her head, and in that moment she broke. "I just wanted help," she whispered, barely audible even to herself. The room remained quiet, painfully quiet. Whitmore turned away, already dismissing her, already moving on. That's when a voice, calm, steady, unmistakably human, cut through the stillness. "That's enough." Not loud, not angry, but firm. Aaliyah froze mid-step. Whitmore turned, irritation flashing across his face. "I'm sorry," he said sharply. The voice came again, closer now. "I said," the man repeated, "that's enough." Aaliyah looked up slowly. From the crowd stepped a man in his late 40s, dressed simply in a dark suit. No flashy accessories, no forced confidence, but his presence shifted the air. His eyes were kind, but sharp, focused. He moved to stand beside Aaliyah, not in front of her, beside her. Whitmore scoffed. "And who are you supposed to be?" he asked dismissively. "This is a private matter." Man didn't raise his voice. "It stopped being private the moment you humiliated her in front of everyone," he said evenly. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Whitmore's jaw tightened. "Sir, I suggest you step back," he said. "This woman is trespassing." The man glanced at Aaliyah. She looked broken, ashamed, exhausted. His expression softened. "Are you all right?" he asked her gently. Aaliyah tried to speak, but her voice failed her again. She nodded weakly. Whitmore let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, come on," he said. "Don't tell me you're buying into this too. She's lying. They always do." The man's eyes flicked back to Whitmore, cool, controlled. "You will not speak about her like that," he said. Whitmore bristled. "And you don't get to tell me how to do my job." The man took a step closer. "I do," he replied quietly. "When your job involves degrading someone who did nothing wrong." Whitmore rolled his eyes. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Security." The man raised a hand. "Not yet," he said. The room held its breath. Aaliyah stood between them, trembling, confused, barely holding herself together. She had hit rock bottom. She had nothing left. And she had no idea that the man standing beside her, the man defending her when no one else would, was about to change everything. The storm hadn't ended, but for the first time, someone had stepped into it with her. The ballroom felt different now, not quieter, just heavier, as if every breath carried weight. The man stood beside Aaliyah, close enough that she could feel the steady calm radiating from him. He didn't touch her, didn't crowd her, but his presence alone felt like a shield she hadn't known she needed. Whitmore straightened his jacket, irritation flashing across his face like a warning flare. "Sir," he said sharply, "I don't know who you think you are, but you're interfering with an official event. This woman is not supposed to be here." The man met his gaze without blinking. "She is shaking," he said evenly. "She is crying, and she is clearly terrified, yet you're more concerned about appearances than people." Whitmore scoffed. "Don't turn this into a morality lesson. I have standards to uphold." "Standards," the man repeated softly. "Or assumptions?" Aaliyah's breath hitched. No one had ever said that for her before. Whitmore folded his arms, leaning back slightly. "Look," he said, voice dripping with impatience, "I deal with situations like this all the time. People come in with stories, fake invites, sob stories. If I let everyone like her stay, this place would turn into a shelter." Aaliyah flinched. The man noticed. His jaw tightened not in rage, but in resolve. "You keep saying people like her," he said. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Whitmore hesitated just for a fraction of a second. "I mean people who don't belong," he snapped. "People who don't fit the profile." "And what profile is that?" the man asked calmly. Whitmore's eyes flicked briefly around the room toward the suits, the gowns, the wealth. "You know exactly what I mean." The man nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "I do." The crowd shifted uneasily. Some guests glanced at one another, suddenly aware of how ugly the moment had become. The man turned to Aaliyah again, lowering his voice. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked gently. Aaliyah," she whispered. "Aaliyah Monroe." He smiled faintly. "That's a beautiful name," he said. Her eyes filled again, this time not with shame, but with confusion and something dangerously close to relief. Whitmore scoffed loudly. "Oh, don't encourage her," he said. "This isn't story time." The man ignored him. "Why did you come here today, Aaliyah?" he asked softly. She hesitated. Her instinct screamed to stay silent, to protect herself, but something in his eyes told her she didn't have to. "My mother is sick," she said, voice breaking. "She needs medicine we can't afford. I was invited here. And I just needed to speak to someone." The words spilled out now unstoppable. "I didn't mean to cause trouble, I just didn't know where else to go." The room fell silent. A few guests looked away, ashamed. Whitmore rolled his eyes. "There it is," he said. "The sob story." The man turned slowly. "You will stop," he said firmly. Whitmore laughed. "Or what?" The man stepped closer, his voice still calm but sharper now. "Or you'll regret the way you're behaving." Whitmore's face reddened. "Is that a threat?" He snapped. "No," the man replied. "It's a warning." Whitmore looked around, clearly expecting support from the crowd. He found none. "Security," Whitmore said again, louder this time. "Remove both of them if necessary." The guards hesitated. They looked at the man, then at Aaliyah, then back at Whitmore. The man raised a hand again, gentle, commanding. "Before you do anything," he said, "I'd like to ask you one simple question, Mr. Whitmore." Whitmore sneered. "How do you know my name?" "I pay attention," the man replied. Whitmore bristled. "What's your question?" he snapped. "Did you verify her invitation?" the man asked. Whitmore hesitated again. "I didn't need to," he said defensively. "So you didn't check?" the man pressed. "I could tell it was fake," Whitmore snapped. The man nodded slowly. "So you made a judgment," he said, "based on how she looks." Whitmore opened his mouth to protest. The man cut him off. "And instead of handling this discreetly," he continued, "you humiliated her loudly, publicly, cruelly." The words landed hard. A ripple of discomfort spread through the crowd. A woman near the front lowered her phone. Whitmore's confidence wavered, but only slightly. "You're overstepping," he said, "whoever you are." The man looked around the room now at the chandeliers, the guests, the staff, the guards. Then he looked back at Whitmore. "I was invited here tonight," he said calmly. "Just like she was." Whitmore laughed. "Oh yeah," he said. "By who?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket. Aaliyah watched, her heart pounding. Whitmore smirked, certain he was about to win. The man pulled out something small, a card. He held it up not just for Whitmore, but for everyone to see. The card was black, simple, elegant, with gold lettering. Whitmore's smirk faltered. The man hadn't revealed anything yet, not his name, not his title. But something in the room shifted again, deeper this time. Because the calm in his voice wasn't uncertainty, it was confidence. The kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and exactly how much power you hold. Aaliyah felt it, the crowd felt it, Whitmore felt it, and though no one knew it yet, they were standing on the edge of a truth that would shatter everything Whitmore thought he controlled. The reveal was coming, and when it did, there would be no place left to hide. The black card glinted under the chandelier lights as the man held it between his fingers. Whitmore stared at it for half a second too long, a second that changed everything. The room had gone completely silent now, not the awkward silence from before, but the kind that comes when instinct tells people something irreversible is about to happen. Whitmore let out a short, dismissive laugh, trying to recover. "And what is that supposed to be?" he asked. "Another fake." The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to the nearest security guard. "Would you please read what that card says?" he asked calmly. The guard hesitated, then stepped closer, squinting slightly. His eyes widened. He swallowed. "Sir," the guard said, voice suddenly unsteady. This is a founder's black invite." A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Whitmore's face drained of color. "That's impossible," Whitmore snapped. "Those are restricted." "Yes," the man said evenly. "They are." The guard straightened instantly, posture rigid. "Ladies and gentlemen," the guard said, clearly nervous now, "this guest is—" The man raised a hand gently. "Let me," he said. He turned slowly to face the room, every eye locked onto him. "My name," he said calmly, "is Jonathan Hale." The name hit the room like a thunderclap. Someone dropped a glass. Another guest whispered, "Oh my God." Whitmore staggered back half a step. "No," he breathed. That's not possible." Jonathan Hale. Billionaire philanthropist, the founder of the Hale Foundation. The man whose name was printed on every banner in the room. The man hosting the gala. Jonathan's eyes settled on Whitmore. "You accused this young woman of lying about being invited by me," Jonathan said. "You mocked her, you humiliated her." Whitmore's mouth opened and closed uselessly. I didn't know," he stammered. Jonathan's gaze hardened. "That," he said quietly, "is the problem." The room was frozen. Aaliyah stood there, barely breathing. Her mind struggled to catch up. Jonathan Hale, the man from the rain, the umbrella, the coffee, her knees felt weak. Jonathan turned to her now, his expression softening completely. "Aaliyah," he said gently, "I told you to come if you needed help." Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. I didn't think you'd remember me," she whispered. Jonathan smiled sadly. "I remember everyone who treats me like a human being," he said. The words struck deep. Jonathan faced the crowd again. "Tonight was meant to celebrate generosity," he said. "Compassion, humanity." His voice grew firmer. "Instead, I witnessed cruelty." Whitmore found his voice again, thin and desperate. "Mr. Hale, please," he said. "I was only doing my job. I didn't realize—" Jonathan cut him off. "You didn't realize she was important," he said, "because you decided importance by appearance." Whitmore shook his head frantically. "That's not what I meant." "But that's what you did," Jonathan said. Truth settled like a verdict. Jonathan turned to the event staff manager standing nearby. "Who hired Mr. Whitmore?" he asked. The manager swallowed. "I did, sir." Jonathan nodded. "Effective immediately," he said, voice calm but final. "Daniel Whitmore is terminated." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the crowd. Whitmore's eyes widened in horror. "You can't do that," he cried. "You can't just—" Jonathan looked at him coolly. "I can," he said, "and I just did." Whitmore's shoulders slumped. "This will ruin me," he whispered. Jonathan's response was quiet. "No," he said, "your behavior did." Whitmore tried one last time. "I was protecting the event." Jonathan shook his head. "You were protecting your prejudice." Security stepped forward now, not toward Aaliyah, but toward Whitmore. "Sir," one guard said firmly, "please step aside." Whitmore looked around desperately. The crowd that had watched silently now avoided his gaze. Phones recording earlier were still raised, but now they were capturing his disgrace. As he was escorted away, Jonathan's voice followed him. "Ensure he is removed from all future Hale Foundation events," he said. "Permanently." Whitmore disappeared through the doors, his power gone, his arrogance exposed. The room remained silent. Then Jonathan turned fully to Aaliyah. She stood trembling, overwhelmed. "I'm so sorry," he said softly, "for what you endured." She shook her head. "You didn't do this," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me." Jonathan's eyes glistened. "You should never have had to beg to be seen," he said. He gestured toward a nearby chair. "Please," he said, "sit." Aaliyah obeyed, her legs barely supporting her. Jonathan addressed the room one final time. "Let this be clear," he said. "This foundation stands for dignity. Anyone who forgets that does not belong here." No one argued, no one moved, because they all understood now. They hadn't just witnessed a scandal, they had witnessed a reckoning. And for Aaliyah, this wasn't just the end of humiliation. It was the beginning of something she never dared imagine. Hope, real hope, had finally stepped into the light, but the story wasn't over yet. Justice had been served. Now compassion would follow. The ballroom remained quiet long after Daniel Whitmore was escorted out. Not the uncomfortable silence from before, but something heavier, reflective, almost reverent. Aaliyah sat on the edge of the chair Jonathan Hale had offered her, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her body was still trembling, the adrenaline of humiliation and shock slowly giving way to exhaustion. Jonathan crouched slightly in front of her so they were at eye level. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said gently. The words hit her harder than any insult ever had. Aaliyah pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling freely again, but these were different tears, not shame. Relief. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," she said through a shaky breath. I didn't know what else to do." Jonathan nodded. "I know," he said, "and you were brave to come." Brave, no one had ever called her that. Jonathan stood and addressed the event director and several senior staff who had gathered nearby. "This gala will continue," he said calmly. "But first, there are a few things that must be made right." He turned to a woman in a navy suit. "I want a full report on how Mr. Whitmore was allowed to treat a guest that way," Jonathan said. "Every decision, every failure." "Yes, Mr. Hale," the woman replied immediately. Jonathan continued, his voice steady but unyielding. "There will be mandatory bias and conduct training for every member of staff," he said, "and anyone who witnessed that abuse and chose silence will be evaluated." The words rippled through the room. Justice wasn't just punishment, it was accountability. Jonathan turned back to Aaliyah. "Now," he said softly, "tell me about your mother." Aaliyah swallowed, her voice barely holding together. "She's sick," she said. "Her lungs, the medicine helps, but we can't afford it anymore. She was struggling to breathe this morning." Jonathan's expression changed instantly. "Where is she now?" he asked. "At home," Aaliyah replied, "with my little sister." Jonathan nodded once. "All right," he said. "Here, what's going to happen." He motioned to an assistant. "I want a doctor sent to her home tonight," he said. "A pulmonologist, top of the line, no waiting." The assistant typed rapidly. "And arrange immediate delivery of her medication," Jonathan added. "Cover it fully ongoing." Aaliyah's eyes widened. "You don't have to," she began. Jonathan gently raised a hand. "Yes," he said, "I do." Her breath hitched. "And the rent?" she whispered, almost ashamed to ask. Jonathan didn't hesitate. "It's paid," he said. "Not just this month. For the foreseeable future." Aaliyah shook her head in disbelief. "I don't understand," she said. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Jonathan looked at her steadily. "Because weeks ago," he said, "you treated a stranger in the rain with kindness when you had nothing to gain." Her memories rushed back, the broken-down car, the shared umbrella, the coffee she had paid for with her last few dollars. "You reminded me," Jonathan continued, "that humanity doesn't belong to the wealthy, it belongs to the willing." Aaliyah broke down completely now, covering her face as sobs shook her body. "I've been so scared," she cried. "Every day I just wanted my mom to be okay." Jonathan placed a reassuring hand on the back of her chair, not touching her without permission, but close enough to ground her. "She will be," he said. "I promise." He waited until she could breathe again. Then he asked gently, "What were your dreams, Aaliyah, before life got so heavy?" She hesitated. "I wanted to be a nurse," she said quietly. "I loved taking care of people, but I had to drop out." Jonathan smiled softly. "Would you like to go back?" Her head snapped up. "What?" "The Hale Foundation offers full scholarships," he said. "Tuition, books, living expenses." Aaliyah stared at him, stunned. I couldn't accept that," she said. "That's too much." Jonathan shook his head. "It's an investment," he said, "in someone who already knows how to care." She laughed through tears. "I don't even know how to thank you." Jonathan smiled. "Live well," he said, "and one day do the same for someone else." The crowd watched silently as hope took shape before their eyes. Aaliyah stood slowly, her posture different now, still humble but no longer broken. "Thank you," she said, meeting his eyes, "for believing me, for seeing me." Jonathan inclined his head respectfully. "You were always worthy of being seen," he replied. As the gala resumed around them, something fundamental had shifted, not just for Aaliyah, but for everyone who had witnessed what happens when power chooses compassion. For the first time in her life, Aaliyah Monroe wasn't surviving. She was finally being lifted. And this moment, born from humiliation, had become the doorway to healing. But her story wasn't finished yet, because the greatest proof of kindness is what grows from it over time. 5 years had passed since that night. Aaliyah Monroe now stood on the balcony of a modest but beautiful townhouse in a quiet, sunlit neighborhood. The air smelled faintly of blooming jasmine, the city humming peacefully below. She leaned against the railing, watching her little sister, Maya, chase their golden retriever across the lawn. The laughter of her younger sibling, a sound that once would have seemed impossible to hear, filled her with warmth. Aaliyah's mother, Ruth, sat nearby in a comfortable armchair, breathing easily for the first time in years, a nurse visiting twice weekly to ensure her ongoing health. Her chest, once fragile and failing, was now strong, fortified by the medications and care that Jonathan Hale had made possible. But more than that, Ruth's eyes sparkled with a serenity that had long been absent from their lives. Aaliyah herself had changed too, not just in circumstance, but in spirit. She had returned to her dream of nursing, excelling in school with scholarships that covered tuition, books, and living expenses. Her days were now a mix of hospital rounds, volunteer work, and mentoring young girls in her old neighborhood. She carried herself with quiet confidence, a dignity honed through hardship tempered by grace and enriched by the opportunities she had been given. Her phone buzzed on the balcony table. A text from Jonathan Hale, "Dinner tonight, family style. Don't let Maya forget to wear her dress." She smiled, remembering that it wasn't just her life he had changed. It was her entire family's. Aaliyah turned back toward the house, taking in the laughter and chatter inside as she helped Ruth inside from the sun. The home was warm, full of light, love, and the small chaos of daily life, something she had fought for without ever knowing how far the journey would take her. Her reflection on the past was vivid. She remembered the day she had walked into the ballroom, trembling, fearful, humiliated, and nearly broken by the cruel judgment of someone she didn't even know. The sting of Whitmore's words, the cold indifference of the crowd, the helpless tears she had shed, they were etched into her memory. And yet she also remembered Jonathan Hale, the calm, the kindness, the authority that had intervened and changed everything. She thought of the lesson she had learned, that humanity is revealed in moments of courage and compassion. She had been judged unfairly because of appearances and circumstance, but someone had believed in her, had recognized her worth when no one else would. And that belief had rewritten her story. Aaliyah knelt on the floor to tie Maya's shoelaces. Her younger sister looked up at her with trust, admiration, and affection. "Big sis," Maya said, "I want to help people like you do, can I?" Aaliyah's heart swelled. She smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from Maya's face. "You already do, Maya. Every time you're kind, every time you see someone who needs help and you act, you're helping, just like I did." Maya nodded enthusiastically, running off to chase the dog again. Aaliyah watched, her gaze lingering on the carefree joy she had once thought impossible for her family. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "We made it." But this wasn't just survival, it was transformation. Her life had been shaped by hardship but uplifted by compassion. She knew now that the difference between despair and hope could hinge on the smallest act of courage or kindness, sometimes from someone powerful, sometimes from someone willing to step up even when no one else would. Aaliyah's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from the Hale Foundation. Another family from her old neighborhood had received assistance for rent and medical care. She smiled, realizing that the chain of compassion she had experienced was now continuing through her hands. Every life she touched could ripple outward, changing someone's world just as hers had been changed. Sitting quietly, she reflected. Life hadn't erased the memory of that day, the humiliation, the fear, the helplessness, but it had reframed it. She was no longer defined by the judgment of others. She was defined by the actions she took, the courage she summoned, and the hope she held on to even in the darkest moments. Aaliyah rose and walked to the window, gazing at the sunset painting the sky in streaks of gold and pink. She breathed deeply, feeling the weight of the past lift slightly with every exhale. The moral of her journey was simple yet profound. True wealth is measured not by what you hold, but by the lives you uplift. Compassion can change the course of destiny, and humanity is revealed in the courage to act when injustice prevails. Aaliyah smiled, knowing she had been given that gift, and now it was her turn to pass it forward. She turned from the window, heading back inside to her mother and sister, her steps light and confident. The past no longer held her captive. She had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. And as she joined her family around the dinner table that evening, she whispered, almost as a promise to herself, "Life isn't about the trials we face, but about what we choose to do with them." The camera would pull back slowly, showing the warmth, laughter, and light filled home, a stark contrast to the cold humiliation of the ballroom years ago. Aaliyah's journey from fear to hope, from despair to empowerment, came full circle. If Aaliyah's story inspired you, share it with someone who needs hope. Like this video, subscribe for more true stories of resilience and compassion, and comment below telling us where you're watching from and how you've seen kindness change someone's life. Because in a world that can be cruel, one act of courage, one voice of compassion can rewrite a life forever.